no scientific reason to think that we have any investment necessary for us to invest in the future. It is not like, say, for example, the case with the religions which believe in reincarnation, where you might be tomorrow born as a very lowly insect, staying in this world. Therefore, you have a certain investment in this world, even after you are dead. That sentiment is now dead. So how do you build an ethical system based on this? Traditionally, all societies have derived their ethics from a basket of sources: religion, history, experience, compassion, empathy, and reason. For the last 350 years, we have been increasingly trying to build our ethics only on reason. And that's a dangerous practice.
I agree.
Because ultimately, that such for objectivity cannot but end in objectification.
Absolutely.
And we are now, already we have begun to pay for that insensitivity. The whole emphasis in contemporary time and in every theory of progress, there is a built-in bias for the productive over the reproductive, for the mature adult than over the immature child, because child is not productive. He will become a good adult. The child's job is to become a citizen as a mature, productive adult. Whereas traditionally, childhood was an end in itself. Old age was an end in itself. Krishna, God, you find him in two incarnations, both as a child, Balakrishna, and as king. Balakrishna is more sacred than Krishna as king, Lord Krishna. And that is also part of the story, and this kind of attempt to sanctify and give an intrinsic legitimacy to childhood, old age, nature. Traditionally, it was in every culture, even in Christianity. There is a very long tradition of man-nature interactions. St. Francis of Assisi was not an accident. Androgynous Christ was not an accident. But I think we have entered a world where these have become markers of ancient times, markers of the past self, which we must shape and learn to live in a perfectly logical, perfectly reasonable world.
What a nightmare.
Yes.
I'm happy you picked up on the question of humanism, because that's not individualism and absolute rationalism and absolute. In fact, I think the increased proclivity towards taking pictures of everything we see and posting it on our Facebook is a sign of decline in metaphysics, because you don't believe in your own memory, and you don't believe in a metaphysics, in an afterlife. I am a great fan of your splendid essay on secularism, against secularism. My own position is very similar to yours, but I have not written a manifesto as you have against secularism. I just don't have a use for it. I found it entirely useless and reluctant. I have no use to use in my conceptual categories. In fact, in my own thinking, it's exactly as you write in your Intimate Enemy, is the substitution of ego for the self. Is not ego. Self is not ego. And even in my own thinking, which is now very much indebted to Levinas, you have to have Emmanuel Levinas is exactly the opposite of I of self becoming the site of perception and understanding. And in my book on Islamic liberation theology, which in fact I replace theology, because I argue theology is identitarian. I replace it with theodicy, because theodicy is alternative. And in it I argue, instead of the Muslim I to be the site of my consciousness, has to be the non-Muslim other that has to be the site of my cognition. That if I become, as identity, the site of my cognition and understanding and consciousness, that is conducive to egocentrism and identity. But if the site of whoever is my other, and in order to make my case very provocative, I say that as a Muslim, I have to consider the face, this is Levinas, the face of a Zionist occupier of Palestine as the site of my conversation and understanding. I have to see the world from his perspective. And that absolute alterity has to become the site of my cognition. So your warning is absolutely correct, because if the nightmare of I become the center of the universe, and it is a moment of Pascal. You remember Pascal says, what frightens me, which is the sort of a post-Copernican moment that we realize Earth, the universe is not geocentric, is actually heliocentric. And you realize you're no longer this biblical sort of God's gift to humanity, but you actually expect some distant planet. This is what is frightful and creates existential crisis. But you won't have existential crisis a la Sartre and others if you never had the illusion that you were the self.
The tradition here has been little different, both in the Indic religions and also even in the Semitic ones. Here they would say that the other, you cannot define yourself without you, because you are you. Plus, this my late friend Ramchandra Gandhi used to put it beautifully, that you are a summation of me and not me. So you are a part of me. Maybe a secondary part, you are a part of me. So you are also a potentiality within me. And I am a part of it. I mean, particularly what you were saying about Persia and India, in one sense can be seen that way. Now, part of Persia is within India, and part of India is within Persia. So, in some sense, you cannot anymore define yourself without me. And that, I think, is a much more mature and much more creative way of conceptualizing the self in contemporary world. And I do believe that this idea of well-demarcated selves is the philosophical basis for many of the problems we see, because we cannot stand that fact anymore, what was taken for granted by the ancients. Like, for example, I've been studying genocide for the last 1.5 decades, and I find that some of the first languages, some of the most